Me, it look like a leprechaun to me. All I gotta do is look up in the tree. Who else seen the leprechaun say yeah?
Hey guys, welcome to CraterMania. I'm your host, the man they call Crater. And as you guys know, this past Monday was St. Patrick's Day. And of course, I didn't put a video out on actual St. Patrick's Day, but I thought that I would put one out this week just to, commemorate that. And what better way to commemorate that than talking about one of my favorite cheesy B movie horror movie franchises of all time, the Leprechaun movies starring Warwick Davis. So tonight I'm going to be talking about the first six Leprechaun movies that star Warwick Davis, and so this will be also a part of my 500 movies in 2025 series. So I'd like to welcome all of you guys that are watching this to this video for this episode. This will be movies number 122 through 127 of the 500 movies in 2025. And before I get started and start talking about these movies, I just want to talk a little bit about the Leprechaun franchise itself and how I got into that. So the first movie came out in the early '90s, and I absolutely was terrified because this was about the time I was about maybe 7 years old when the movie came out. And of course, I've mentioned this before, but my dad was really the reason that I got into horror movies to begin with, because he was always watching them, and I think more or less he was trying to just scare the shit out of me by having me watch these movies with him. And for some reason, when I was a kid, I think it might have been my dad might have been a part of it, where why I was so scared, because as I gotten older, these Leprechaun movies are not really scary. They're just more funny than anything. But I don't know. I think my dad liked to terrorize me when I was a kid, and um, but yeah, there for the longest time I was so scared of Leprechaun. But because he did look super freaking creepy to me, when I was a kid, and just I don't know, I had this weird thing when I was a kid that I would if it was dark through the house and I had to go through the house at night, I was always just kind of looking around corners and stuff, just making sure that the leprechaun wasn't around. And I know that sounds super weird, but that's just that was just the fun of, I guess, of being a kid and getting into horror at that early age. Um, but I also, before I get into the movies, I also wanted to talk about the timelines of these movies and the continuity. So, Warwick Davis has went on record in the past to say that the Leprechaun in all of the movies that he's in is the same Leprechaun. But here's where I have a hard time believing that, because, well, he could be right. It could be the same Leprechaun, but the only way that would work in the way that I see it is if these are all alternate timelines or alternate universes with that same character. And the reason I say that is because it just there's a few different movies in the franchise where he does talk about his age. Like in the first movie, when he gets pulled over by the cop in the go-kart, the cop says something like, "Aren't you a little young to be driving out on the road?" And he says that he's 600 years old. But that could be a lie. Just where the leprechaun is evil and he is known to lie about things. Maybe he is lying about his age there. Because in Leprechaun 2, majority of the movie takes place in 1994, but the opening of the film takes place 1,000 years prior, in the year 994, on St. Patrick's Day. And he is celebrating his 1000th birthday, which means that if it's the year 994 and he's 1,000 years old, then he was around in biblical times. Um, And then, of course, the 1,000 years later in 1994, he's 2,000 years old. So, which just takes place 1 year after the original movie in 1993. So there's a big like difference in the ages that are mentioned here, and that whole biblical thing, like that comes back around in Leprechaun Back to the Hood, the sixth film in the series, where they're talking to Esmeralda, the psychic, and she knows all about the origins of the leprechaun, and she says that his existence predates Christianity. So there's a lot of stuff there that is kind of convoluted and really like I don't know. It's just like the only way I could figure out it to have it make any kind of sense, which there's a lot of stuff in here in these movies that don't make sense. So it's just kind of like there's really no trying to like put any kind of logic behind it, but you know what I mean. And just also, if you look at the statue of the leprechaun at the beginning of Leprechaun 3, that same statue is used in Leprechaun in the Hood, and those are like two different time periods. Like, because Leprechaun 3 takes place in '95, and there's a statue of him at the beginning of the film. And then in Leprechaun in the Hood, the beginning of the movie starts out in 1980, and then Ice-T takes the statue of the leprechaun with him, and 20 years later, he still has it in the year 2000. So, yeah, the only way I can look at this is if these are all like not one timeline. There's no true continuity in these films. They're just look at them as all like different stories and different timelines. Is the only way I can make sense of it. But I guess with that said,
Me, it look like a leprechaun to me. All you gotta do is look up in the tree. Who else seen the leprechaun? Say yeah!
I had to throw that in there again. But yeah, let's go ahead and start talking about these movies, and let's go ahead and start talk about what the very first film in this series, the one that started all, Leprechaun from 1993. Um, so I'm gonna try to do like a deep dive on this, and I might talk a little bit the original since this one started it all, and this kind of really this movie rejuvenated Warwick Davis's career. I might do a little longer review of this first film, and then try to keep it short on the other ones but so let's go ahead and do this deep dive, I guess, into this 90s cult classic that's really near and dear to my heart, and that's Leprechaun from 1993. And as a lifelong horror fan, I've seen it all, from the absolute masterpieces to absolute garbage. And Leprechaun, it's that perfect sweet spot in my opinion. It's a very entertaining blend of just genuinely creepy and surprisingly funny, and just plain crazy, as crazy as shit, man. These movies are, especially this first one. It knows exactly what it is. Like it has, um, it really recognizes that what it is, and it embraces that. Um, and it's not trying to be some kind of like horror masterpiece or anything like that. Thank goodness for that. It's this insane little monster movie that delivers on its promise that an evil leprechaun, with a gift for rhymes and a deadly obsession with his gold. Um, and this movie was directed by Mark Jones, and just Leprechaun is an experience, and it's a huge part of that experience is the fantastic makeup effects, which were done by Gabe Bartalos. I think that's how you say his last name. He worked on with like several other movies, especially with like Frank Henenlotter's. I think he worked on like Basket Case, maybe Frankenhooker. But he's done a lot. Gabe has been around for a long time. He's a legend in makeup effects. Um, and he really truly brought the leprechaun to life with those prosthetics that are both believable and just terrifyingly charming, I think. And the look is iconic, especially that original look in the first film, with the pointy ears, the rotten teeth, the mischievous eyes of Warwick Davis. And that's something that really stands out to me is the leprechaun's eyes. That's me with like everybody though. Like thing I always first notice when I meet somebody or see someone is their eyes, and something about Warwick Davis's eyes are very like distinct, and you can always tell it's him in any character role he's in. If he's behind makeup or whatever, you can always tell. And I think that just is something that also contributes to the film's charm. Um, so Leprechaun, released, like I said, released in 1993, is just, it's a horror comedy that is a huge cult following in the horror community. And like I said, it's near and dear to my heart because I love horror. I love comedies. I love horror comedies. Um, and the movie centers around this evil leprechaun who is lured from his pot of gold and just accidentally unleashed upon this unsuspecting group of people. Um, and what follows is this ridiculous rampage fueled by the leprechaun's greed for his stolen gold, and it's a film that doesn't take itself seriously. And whether that's a strength or a weakness, depends entirely on the viewer's tolerance for campy horror. Um, but the movie unfolds in kind of two distinct acts, separated by this 10-year gap. And the beginning of the movie, starts out in 1983, and we're introduced to Dan O'Grady, who is this man who has returned from Ireland with a stolen pot of gold. And he's a frantic type guy who's desperate to hide this stolen gold on his farm in North Dakota. And things quickly go south when the leprechaun ends up tracking him down. And the leprechaun ends up brutally murdering O'Grady's wife, and then O'Grady manages to struggle with the leprechaun, and ends up subduing him in with this four leaf clover and trapping him in this like wooden crate. And then he places the four leaf clover on top of the crate so the leprechaun can't get out. And but before he can finish the job and destroy the leprechaun inside the crate, he ends up suffering a stroke, and this leaves the leprechaun in prison. So flash forward 10 years later, there's this man named JD Redding and his teenage daughter, Tori, who's played by young Jennifer Aniston. And they arrived to spend the summer in O'Grady's old farmhouse. So they hire this trio of these local handymen, Nathan Murphy and his younger brother Alex, and their friend that's kind of somewhat dim-witted, Ozzie Jones. And during the renovations, Ozzie he mistakenly takes the imprisoned leprechaun's cries for help as if though it's the voice of a child. So he's going to like kind of figure out like where this is coming from, what's going on, and and he hears it coming from this crate, and he accidentally removes the four leaf clover from the crate, unleashing the leprechaun out of there. And after this happens, Ozzy, he tries to tell him about it and everything, and they think he's just making it up. And he sees this rainbow forming, and he's convinced that this rainbow is going to lead to gold. Uh, Now that he knows that this leprechaun is around, so he chases this rainbow and he drags Alex along with him, and they end up stumbling upon this hidden stash of these 100 gold coins. And Ozzy bites down on one of the coins, testing to see if it's real gold, and he accidentally swallows the coin. So this ends up setting the leprechaun on this kind of relentless pursuit, fueled by his greed and need to reclaim every single piece of his stolen gold. Um, so the leprechaun's rampage on this kind of begins seemingly with like these harmless pranks and stuff, but it ends up quickly escalating to a bunch of gruesome murders. And um, one of the first things he does is he lures JD, which is Tori's dad, into this kind of trap by imitating a cat that's meowing. And and JD, he reaches his hand in there, and the leprechaun bites his hand. Um, and then a little bit beyond this, the Alex and Ozzy take a piece of the gold to a pawn shop owner to try to see, if it's legit and stuff. And the pawn shop owner asks to keep it overnight to kind of inspect it and all that. So the leprechaun ends up coming into the pawn shop owner and killing the pawn shop and killing the pawn shop owner. And he ends up jumping on his body and doing like his, trademark rhyming while he's jumping on his body on a pogo stick. And before he leaves the pawn shop, he makes sure to shine that dead body's shoes before he leaves. Um, and then, as he's leaving, he finds this go kart. So he takes this go kart to make his way back to the farmhouse, and this leads to this kind of hilarious scene where he gets pulled over by this police officer, uh, who then gets chased, you know, by the leprechaun into the woods, and eventually the police officer is killed. Um, so the group then realizes that this horror that they're facing, and tries everything to stop the leprechaun. Everything seems useless, including shotguns, and um, so they retrieve the stolen bag of gold that Ozzy and Alex had hidden in the well there on the property. Um, but they try to give the gold back to the leprechaun, and the leprechaun realizes that one coin is still missing, which is the one that Ozzy swallowed. So the leprechaun ends up becoming even more enraged at this, and he learns that that O'Grady is still alive and he's in a nursing home. So Tori is trying to race to the nursing home to get there before the leprechaun gets there, and then once she gets there, she goes into the room with O'Grady, and she finds that the leprechaun has disguised itself as O'Grady. And so this kind of begins this chase back through the nursing home. And after chasing Tori to this elevator, the leprechaun ends up throwing O'Grady's body down the shaft and through the roof of the elevator. And before O'Grady dies, he tells Tori that the only way to kill the leprechaun is with a four-leaf clover. So Tori returns back to the farmhouse and to the field to try to find a four-leaf clover. And when she eventually does, she gives that to Alex. And the ending sees the group, who are battered and bruised at this point after their battles with the leprechaun, and they make this final stand against him. And Ozzy, with the gold coin still lodged inside him, um, becomes the leprechaun's primary target at this point. So in this desperate move to kind of protect the group, Alex takes the four-leaf clover and attaches it to a wad of gum in his slingshot and shoots it into the leprechaun's mouth, causing him to melt and into a puddle of green goo and fall into the well. And thinking that they finally defeated the leprechaun, they are horrified when his skeleton ends up emerging from the well. So Nathan ends up pushing the skeleton back down and blows up the well with gasoline. Um, so the film ends with the police arriving, and only for the leprechaun's disembodied voice to promise his return, vowing to reclaim every last piece of his gold. And I mean that for the first film. I mean, at this point when the movie came out, nobody was aware that there was going to be any kind of sequels or anything. They didn't know if this was going to be successful. But I think when this movie came out, people loved it, and people were already familiar with Warwick Davis and being in A Return of the Jedi as Wicket the Ewok. He was in Willow, and several other things. But you know nobody was expecting him to come in and take this role of the leprechaun and absolutely kill it. Like, no pun intended, but yeah, he actually does an amazing job, and it's definitely one of my favorite roles of Warwick Davis. Um, so let's talk a little bit more about Warwick Davis as the Leprechaun. So his performance, I think, is the film's true gold. He perfectly embodies that Leprechaun character with a just a perfect blend of like menace and that dark humor. Um, and he's just hilarious threats while he's rhyming, and just his obsession with his gold and shining people's shoes. It's just this surprisingly effective use of like slapstick to kind of create this villain that you love to hate and hate to love. Um, and Warwick Davis and all of that, he really does elevate the material that's given to him here. Um, just turning what could have been a forgettable monster into this memorable and iconic horror figure. Um, So I think, without Warwick Davis, these movies would not be as iconic as they are. And just his physical performance in it is incredible. He's all twitchy and very energetic, and it's captivating just how amazing of a job that he does in this. I absolutely love it. Um, he fully commits to the role, and he delivers all these rhymes, and like they're rhymes, but they're also threats at the same time. Just with this kind of that blend of like of evil and campiness. I don't know, like, uh, but I definitely think the role cemented his status as a horror icon. I mean, I don't think anybody was ever expecting that with Warwick Davis, but it's amazing to think about. And Tori Redding, who is the character that Jennifer Aniston played in this, and this was pre-Friends days, so and this is one of her earliest roles, and she portrays Tori as a kind of somewhat spoiled and initially naive young woman, but she quickly adapts, to the situation there, and ends up becoming this really resourceful and just determined person who is trying to defend her family and her friends. Um, and while it's not like a groundbreaking performance or anything, it's a fun watch for sure. And you can definitely see that kind of raw talent that would end up making her a household name with friends. Um, and in other films she was in as well, like I'll tell you a really good movie I like her in. It's called The Good Girl. It's her and Jake Gyllenhaal. It's a really good movie. I can't remember what year it came out. It's a long time ago. I watched that movie, but I thought it was a great movie. Um, but yeah, she really bring in Leprechaun. She really brings a much needed sense of like groundedness to these otherwise kind of absurd events that are like unfolding around her. Um, and then next we have Nathan Murphy, who is played by Ken Olant, I think is his name, something like that. But anyway, Nathan provides this kind of responsible, level-headed presence that the group needs, and he kind of acts as the protector and this problem solver. Just kind of a contrast to the more comedic elements in the movie. And then his little brother Alex Murphy, who's played by Robert. What is his last name? Robert Gorman or something like that. So Alex is this kind of resourceful, younger brother of Nathan, who ends up ultimately saving the day, and because he's the one who launches that four-leaf clover into the leprechaun's mouth and kills him. And then Ozzy Jones, who's played by Mark Holton. So I just talked about Mark Holton last week when I was doing the March Madness stuff, and because I talked about Teen Wolf, and he's also in that as the character Chubby, I think is his name. But in this, he plays Ozzy, and Ozzy is the film's comedic relief. And while his portrayal of that dim-witted character might be questionable by modern standards, um, he's kind of got these innocent intentions, and ultimately he has he becomes brave, and that bravery really adds like a layer of heart to the film, I think. um and as far as some of the memorable moments, I mentioned one earlier, about the pawn shop. That's one of the first ones I always think about when it comes to the original Leprechaun, is when he's just doing the rhyming, like this man Lep, he played one or something. I can't remember what he's saying in that scene, but like, just it's terrifying, but it's also just comedic to see him just like bouncing and killing this guy by jumping him with a pogo stick. And then to follow up on that scene, this is right after he takes the go kart and he's just driving down the road, and then it cuts to like this police officer sitting on the side of the road in his police cruiser, and he sees it coming, and then he takes and he pulls him over. Um, and then of course that ends up leading to the police officer's death as they, you know, he's chased into the woods by the leprechaun, and they're playing like this whole little hide and seek game, and it's it's very like the leprechaun is very childlike in this one. Because you also got the scene where he's riding the tricycle, and then there's like the scene where he's going back and forth on the skateboard by the doorway, and they're trying to shoot at him with the shotgun. And then there's a scene where he's like going down the road, roller skating, and he can't get control of these roller skates, and he ends up going through a fence, and it leaves like a an outline of his body. So it's very slapstick, Three Stooges type humor. I love it. It's that's definitely something that's targeted towards me. I love that. And then, of course, the ending, the when Alex does shoot the four leaf clover into the leprechaun's mouth, and I don't know how they didn't get sued for this, because the line when he shoots before he shoots the four leaf clover into the leprechaun's mouth, he says "fuck you, Lucky Charms." So I don't know how they didn't get sued for that by mentioning Lucky Charms in that movie. Um, but overall, Leprechaun, has had this kind of significant impact on the horror genre, I believe, and it spawned a franchise of sequels, which some are better than others. But it also cemented the Leprechaun as this kind of memorable and somewhat ridiculous horror icon. Um, and just the film's blend of horror and humor has really influenced, I think, countless other genre films as well. Um, and it I think that type of humor kind of brought attention back to older, comedy horrors and stuff like that. Full Moon was putting out, like Trauma was putting out, and that kind of brought them back into the spotlight as well after the Leprechaun movie came out. Um, and it just the popularity of the Leprechaun movies is, I think, is just a testament to its kind of unique charm. Um, and it proves the movie proves that you don't need like a massive budget or serious intentions to really create a cult classic, because all you need is a killer premise, a charismatic villain, and just that healthy dose of genuine absurdity. If you're looking for a fun and like fright filled and utterly ridiculous horror movie, look no further than Leprechaun. And I think uh, it is awesome that there's people that still love this movie and talk about this movie this day. And I think I mentioned this on a previous stream, but Trick or Treat Studios just announced at Toy Fair that they're coming out with a Leprechaun figure. So I cannot wait to get that. And I hope that kind of leads to other, companies maybe putting out more Leprechaun merchandise. I know there's a lot of t-shirt like I think maybe Cavity Colors and Fright Rags and Gutter Garbs. There's several different, t-shirt companies that put out a lot of Leprechaun merchandise. Um, but I would love to see like more figures of the Leprechaun other than the one that's coming out by Trick or Treat Studios. I would love to see ones of him like in different attires and stuff, which he kind of keeps the same standard outfit throughout all the movies, but there's a few instances where he does have different outfits, and I'll get to that here in just a little bit. Um, but yeah, I mean, who doesn't love the original Leprechaun, right? But moving on, I guess I'll go on to the next movie, and this is Leprechaun 2 from 1994. So buckle up your shoes, folks, because I'm about to dive headfirst into this gloriously cheesy and gore-soaked sequel that is Leprechaun 2. And this isn't just some throwaway sequel. It masters in that low budget horror comedy that really delivers the goods here. And what Leprechaun 2 is that it doubles down on everything I think that made the original well, it was something. The original was definitely something. And I think this, like I said, Leprechaun 2 really doubles down on that, and it just it continues to embrace that ridiculousness with open arms, and just kind of offering up a blend of this surprisingly inventive kills and just these sharp one liners, and of course Warwick Davis's just unforgettable performance as the Leprechaun. And it's not a masterpiece or anything, folks, but it is damn entertaining for sure. Um, so the director for this one's name was Rodman Flender, and I think he knows exactly what kind of movie he was making here, and and he definitely steers the ship with a steady hand, and just ensures that the humor really lands, and that the gore is there. That's that's enjoyable for horror fans. Um, but the movie itself wastes no time in kind of establishing this backstory. So we kick things off in this film in the year 994 in Ireland on St. Patrick's Day, and we find the Leprechaun is celebrating his 1000th birthday, and he's all set to marry this woman that's been promised to him, and you know um, and part of that him getting married is that he once he marries this woman, then his slave, William O'Day, will be free. But the catch is that the leprechaun's bride to be is none other than William O'Day's daughter. So when O'Day begs for her life, the leprechaun lays down this twisted condition, is as if she sneezes 3 times without someone saying "God bless you," uh, then she's his bride. And he obviously does what he can to make her sneeze in that moment. So right as he's about to make her sneeze for the third time, uh, O'Day has like that well timed "God bless you." So he saves his daughter, but this makes the leprechaun, uh, enraged, and just that. So he ends up taking O'Day's life, and then he promises that um, he will claim a descendant of O'Day's family as his bride on his next 1000th birthday. So fast forward now to 1,000 years later in 1994 in Los Angeles, where we meet Cody, who is played by Charlie Heath. He's this young guy that's working with his uncle Morty, giving these really shady, dark side tours. It's kind of a scam, and Cody is forced to take over, when Morty ends up getting too drunk and hammered, and he has to end up ditching a date with his girlfriend Bridget O'Day, or I think her name is not it's not Bridget O'Day, because she's a girl that's that's a descendant from the girl in the opening of the movie, but I think her name is like Bridget something. I'm sorry, but yeah, she is a part of that O'Day lineage, and but like I said, he had to end up ditching the date with her, and so while he's doing this tour and everything, Bridget ends up going to this go kart track, run by this guy that Cody doesn't like, named Ian. Um, and this is really where the fun begins in the movie, because the leprechaun, having waited patiently, ends up emerging from this real Irish tree that's conveniently growing at the Harry Houdini's old house, because why not? Uh, and he needs gold, so he rips a gold tooth out of this homeless man that happens to be nearby, and then he ends up setting his sights on Bridget, who is the descendant of the O'Day bloodline. Um, and this kind of series of just really increasingly absurd events, starts happening. Cody gets arrested, and Morty bails him out, and Ian ends up getting killed at the hands, or really the blades of this leprechaun controlled like lawnmower or something like that. Um, I think it's supposed to be a lawnmower that he gets killed in. I mean, it's like these huge blades. They look like lawnmower blades. But anyway, the leprechaun, he tries to get to Bridget, and Cody does everything that he can just to stop it. But when when the leprechaun loses a coin in this whole scuffle, the leprechaun needs to leave to retrieve his coin, and now Cody is the prime suspect in Ian's murder. So as Cody and Morty are trying to figure out how to stop the leprechaun attacks, demanding his coin back, and Cody makes this deal, and they try to they escape to a bar which is celebrating St. Patrick's Day, and Morty notices that the leprechaun is sitting at the end of the bar, and he ends up challenging him to this drinking contest, and just assuring that Cody and Bridget cannot be taken as long as the leprechaun is with him. So Morty ends up winning this contest, but the leprechaun escapes and he sobers up at this espresso bar, and he ends up murdering the bartender at the espresso bar who was just mocking him for his height and stuff, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a bit, but Cody and Morty, they end up they make this plan to trap the leprechaun in this cast iron safe, which is because cast iron is one of the leprechaun's weaknesses, and of course things end up going horribly wrong, and um, Morty, in this kind of stroke of pure greed, uses three wishes that are granted by the leprechaun to try and get rich. Uh, and that's a decision that ends up with him being disemboweled and killed, unfortunately. Um, so Cody then finally confronts the leprechaun, in his like kind of underground lair inside of the tree, um, and this it's the lair is kind of like this. It's really like an underground labyrinth, which is like filled with skeletons and these booby traps, and um, he ends up overcoming all these obstacles, and then he rescues Bridget, and kind of this final act of like cleverness, he ends up tricks the leprechaun in to combusting with a cast iron stake, and then our heroes are then they after the leprechaun has been killed, they escape into the sunlight, presumably ending the this kind of reign of terror, I guess, by the leprechaun. Um, so of course, Warwick Davis again is back as a leprechaun in this, and he's the heart and soul of the Leprechaun franchise, and other than what I've already said, I mean, it's just he does another fantastic job here, and I want to talk a little bit about, I talked about the Leprechaun figure that Trick or Treat Studios is putting out, and I said I would like to see other outfits for the Leprechaun, and I know this is very obscure, and this is for my just own selfish reasons, but so of course, let me go ahead and just change my screen up a little bit here for a second. So of course, we got now that's his like classic look right there. So, and that's what we know him normally as in the original film, and then this is what he's wearing throughout the majority of Leprechaun 2. And of course, you see Bridget here as well, the lovely Bridget. Um, but throughout the film, especially in the opening, so this was in the year 994. Um, he is wearing a little different. He's wearing like a cloak. It looks like some like a necklace with bones on it, and a different looking cap. Um, and I really, really enjoy this look in the opening of the movie, and I would love to see them make a figure of that. And then that's the only two like outfits that he wears in the movie. But I would love to see this outfit on a Leprechaun figure as well, but I highly doubt, honestly, if I'm being honest, I don't think it would be something they would ever do. But you never know. Um, but let me see. So going on with the rest of the characters here, Charlie Heath, who plays Cody Ingalls. Cody is just your average kind of hapless, but ultimately, good-hearted guy. And Cody has this kind of relatable quality to him about where it kind of it makes him easy to root for, and Even when he's kind of making these really stupid decisions. Um, and then Siobhan Durkin, who plays Bridget in this, and she's kind of like the damsel in distress, but kind of has a very feisty edge to her, and um, she's not afraid to fight back, and she definitely holds her own, against the leprechaun in this. Sorry about that. My back was itching real bad. Um, but then we got Sandy Barron, who plays Morty in this, and Morty is that sleazy, kind of opportunist. Um, and he's Cody's uncle, and he provides a lot of the film's kind of comedic relief, other than what the Leprechaun provides. And all of his intentions are kind of motivated by his own self interest. Um, so he's a likable character, but ultimately, he kind of got what he deserved in the end. And also, there's a few cameos in this as well that's worth mentioning. So Clint Howard is in the early on when Cody is doing the dark side tours, and Clint Howard plays the tourist that gets conned into taking this tour. And I've seen this man in movies so many times that when he is on screen, I know something awesome is about to happen. And of course, I can't mention him without mentioning his girlfriend, the tourist's girlfriend in this, who's played by Kimmy Robertson, and Um, she's amazing because I think she's very quirky, and she's kind of got like a unique voice and just kind of a really unique personality. And I think that's what really drew David Lynch to her, and he ended up casting her in Twin Peaks. So it's definitely fun to see her in there as well as a cameo as Clint Howard's girlfriend. Um, and Tony Cox has a cameo in this as well. Tony Cox, he was in Bad Santa with Billy Bob Thornton. He was in Willow, which is another film that he was in with Warwick Davis. And this, he doesn't really have a name. He's just this leprechaun, this little black leprechaun that's in the bar. And it's a very quick moment in the film, but it's definitely entertaining to see. And I'm guessing this he was friends with Warwick Davis because they worked together on Willow, and maybe Warwick Davis helped him get that part in the movie. But that's a very memorable part in the movie to me. And the waiter, like I said, that worked, or the barista from the espresso shop. So this role is played by Michael McDonald. And when I initially seen Leprechaun 2, this, like I said, it came out in '94, so this was before Mad TV was a thing. But when Mad TV started and he was on there, because he did the Stewart character and several other characters on the show, I knew that I had seen him before, but I didn't know where. And it ends up that I did see him, of course, in Leprechaun 2. As I watched it, again after I'd seen Mad TV, it's like, oh, that's right, he was in this. And he went on to do several other roles in movies, especially he was in the last, I think it was Halloween Kills. He was in as I can't remember what was his name now in that movie. It was something funny. Um, I can't remember. I tried not to remember Halloween Kills though. I wasn't that big of a fan of that movie. But yeah, I mean, this is really fun to see him as that little cameo here in Leprechaun 2, though. And as far as like some of the memorable moments for me, definitely the lawnmower scene, which is kind of this classic um, kill, I think, in the whole franchise, because it's just the sheer absurdity of the leprechaun just disguising the lawnmower and then using it to kill Ian is both hilarious and gruesome. Because in that scene, this is after Ian takes Bridget home, and he's wanting to come in, but she won't let him. And then she's like, I'm still dating Cody or whatever. And then as Ian's leaving, he hears her voice calling to him from the garage. And so this is, of course, is a trick by the leprechaun. And so Ian goes to the garage, and they're like, they're talking and everything, and like and he sees this as if she is real, but this is definitely just a trick, a mirage by the leprechaun. and she starts to take her shirt off and everything, and like he starts like he's like at eye level with her boobs, and you just it kind of cuts away. You see this shadow, and you see that she's not really there. It's really like this big like lawnmower or whatever in front of, and he just pushes his face like towards what's supposed to be her, but he just ends up pushing his face into the lawnmower blades. And I think by them that works by them like kind of doing that because that was a huge staple in horror years ago, where certain kills they wouldn't show, but they would just more imply it than anything. And I think that those kind of types of kills work just as well as the ones we actually see on screen. And hey, Greg, how's it going, man? Glad to have you here, man. How are you doing tonight? Um, but yeah, I mean, like I think that's a very one of the most classic kills in the entire Leprechaun franchise. And then, of course, the barista death, Michael McDonald's character, um, just that with the Leprechaun's reaction to being mocked for his height, this that ends up kind of culminating in this brutal murder of the barista, where the espresso machine, like the steam of it comes out, and it's like it just melts his face off, and that's a definitely a huge memorable moment for this movie for me. And one of the few other there's a few others, including like the labyrinth, which is the leprechaun's lair that we see towards the end of the movie. But to me, the most memorable moment is another kill in this movie, and it's the one with Morty, as Morty is making these wishes, and it's kind of, and as this entire sequence is just kind of this perfect example of that schlocky type horror, because these very vague wordings, phrases that Morty gives during his wishes ends up kind of resulting in these really horrific consequences to where he ends up getting the pot of gold stuck in his stomach. And so because he wants the leprechaun's gold, and so he ends up wishing for it, and the leprechaun gives it to him, but it's inside of his stomach, and so his like stomach is like grown out, skin's all stretched out, and you just see this kind of outline of this pot of gold. And then he uses his third wish to have it taken out of him, and of course the way that it's taken out of him is by the leprechaun ripping into his flesh and tearing it out of him, which ends up killing Morty. And I'm telling you, when I saw that for the first time when I was a kid and in '94, like I said, I was probably about 8 years old when that movie came out. That messed me up for sure. I was like, whoa, that because like I said, I was already scared of the Leprechaun as it is, but like when Leprechaun 2 came out and I seen that in the movie, oh man, it was wild. Um, and just Leprechaun 2 overall though has really earned I think another special place in the hearts of horror fans, including mine. And it's a perfect example of so bad it's good type of movie that that really just kind of reveals in its own ridiculousness. Um, and it definitely continued to solidify Warwick Davis as this horror icon. And it again just I think it helped pave the way for these other sequels that would come out and that followed this. And it's another movie like the original. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and I think that's precisely why it's so enjoyable. And so if you're looking for another fun movie that's gory and just has that really absurd horror comedy to it, if you're going to check out Leprechaun, you can't stop there. You got to check out Leprechaun 2. It's definitely worth checking out. It's probably one of my favorite horror movie sequels. And that's saying a lot. There's a lot of horror movie sequels out there, and this definitely might be one of my favorites. Um, but moving on now to what is my favorite Leprechaun movie out of the whole franchise. And this is Leprechaun 3 from 1995. And it's just, it's another continuation of that campy horror comedy franchise, which, this time taking the Leprechaun to Sin City in Las Vegas for this new round, I guess, of gold obsessed mayhem. Um, and like I said, this is my personal favorite movie, just for a multitude of reasons. The kills and the humor are both amped up in this one for sure. Just the whole idea of the leprechaun running loose in Vegas, this town full of greed, is just it's amazing. And aside from Warwick Davis, it's got another horror icon in here, Carolyn Williams, who was from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And I don't. There's just so many other reasons to love this one, and this one was directed by a guy named Brian Trenchard Smith, and you know, his kind of directorial style is exactly, I think, what this franchise needed. Because he's a legend. Brian Trenchard Smith is a legend in the B movie world. He's a legend to me. I don't know about anybody else, but he's a legend to me. So he's a legend in that B movie world. He's known for films like Dead End Drive-In and BMX Bandits, the one with Nicole Kidman. And he's not afraid to embrace the kind of ridiculous and um, you know I think that's precisely what makes Leprechaun 3 work, is because it's so ridiculous. And um, Brian's direction is really fast paced, just kind of full of these practical effects, which is I think is a must for any hardcore horror fan. And it doesn't take itself too seriously. So the film opens up, in Las Vegas, where this man who is, lacking several body parts, ends up selling this leprechaun statue to this guy named Gupta, who is this pawn shop owner. And seems like Leprechaun has a continuing thing with pawn shop owners, right? Um, but anyway, despite all the warnings and stuff, Gupta ends up removing this medallion that is placed around the neck of the statue, and this ends up bringing the leprechaun to life. And so Gupta ends up noticing this pot of gold coins alongside the statue. But like I said, as this happens, the leprechaun is awakening from his slumber, and he ends up attacking Gupta. Um, and the leprechaun ends up fleeing with his gold, and he drops a coin in the process. So Gupta takes the coin, and he finds this computer program that details all these Irish folklore stories and all that, revealing that a leprechaun's coin grants a single wish, and that their power stems from that gold. And just after realizing that he's missing a coin, the leprechaun ends up tricking Gupta into putting away the medallion, and then he viciously murders him. Um, Meanwhile, all this is happening. There's this guy named Scott McCoy, who is a college student, and he's making his way because he has like 20, I think he says like $23,000 or something like that in tuition money, and he's driving through Vegas, and he sees this girl that has broke down on the side of the road named Tammy, and so he decides to stop and help Tammy, and she ends up telling him that she works at this nearby casino called the Lucky Shamrock Casino. So Scott convinces Tammy to sneak him into the casino, where he ends up losing all of his tuition money, all of his $23,000, and all he's got left is this watch that his grandfather gave him. And this is all at the same table too. This is the same table where he lost all this money. He didn't spread it out or anything. He just lost it all at the same table. Who is run by this woman named Loretta, who's played by Carolyn Williams in this movie. And so after he loses all his money, like I said, all he's got is his watch. But to try to get more money, he tries to take it to this pawn shop to sell the watch so he can get more money. So but when he gets to the pawn shop, he discovers it. He discovers Gupta's corpse laying on the floor, um, and he also finds the missing gold coin that belongs to the leprechaun. So, kind of unaware of the power that's within this coin, Scott just kind of casually wishes that he's back at the casino with it with this winning streak, and then instantly he's teleported back to the casino at the same table he was at before with Loretta. And this time, he's racking up. Where he's got this coin now, it's giving him all this luck, and he's winning tons of money here. So as his luck is turning around now at the casino, he starts to accumulate all these different winnings at that roulette table, and so this casino owner kind of notices this name, and the casino owner's name is Mitch. He just kind of fears any kind of further losses, so he like ends up closing the table down, and he offers Scott this complimentary room there at the hotel. Um, and after this, as he's taken to try to, to cash in his winnings or whatever, he encounters Tammy again, who advises him to hide in his room until her shift ends. Um, and while they're having this conversation, there's this side conversation over here between Loretta and this guy named Fazio, who is the casino's magician, and they're plotting to steal, all of Scott's winnings and the coin as well. Um, so Fazio manages uh, to get into Scott's hotel room and steal the coin, and and he runs off with it. Um, so after this happens, Scott has now that he's lost the coin, he's lost all his luck, and the leprechaun is now able to get to Scott, and they end up having this kind of back and forth battle where the leprechaun ends up biting Scott on the arm, and Scott stabs him with something. I can't remember what it was, but he stabs the leprechaun, and this causes the leprechaun to bleed into Scott's wounded arm, kind of mixing their blood together. Um, and that'll come into play here a little bit later. But Loretta ends up taking the coin from Fazio, but Mitch steals it from from Loretta, and Mitch makes this kind of sarcastic wish to have sex with Tammy. So the the coin ends up making this wish start to come true as it kind of diminishes Tammy's like intelligence and turns her into this really dim-witted bimbo, and so she ends up like declaring her love for Mitch, and she's talking like all baby talk to him, and it's just something completely different from what her actual personality is. And so they go up to this hotel room, and as Tammy is like performing this kind of strip tease, in front of Mitch, um, Loretta breaks into the room as this is and she steals the coin back. So when she steals the coin back, that of course takes Mitch's luck away, and it breaks this spell and causes Tammy to come back to her senses and just kind of reject Mitch and his advances and all that. And this ends up leading Mitch to fire her. So after she gets fired and she runs out of the room and all that, the leprechaun appears in the hotel room with Mitch. And so in this instant, he's on the TV screen, and he's appearing in in these different like kind of like mock commercials that was mocking commercials that were kind of popular at the time on TV. And then the channel switches to like this woman that's in dressing on TV, and she starts to come out of the TV crawling and on top of Mitch and all that, seducing him. Um, but of course, like as I said, Loretta stole the coin back and took that luck away from Mitch. That woman now turns into a robot, which electrocutes Mitch to death in the process. um, and then, like I said earlier, Scott, he had that battle, that back and forth with the leprechaun, which caused him to get bit by the leprechaun, and then he stabs the leprechaun, and then the blood fell into his wound and their blood mixed. So Scott starts experiencing these kind of physical changes now, and he starts developing cravings for like potatoes, and he has this really like thick Irish accent, and these other kind of like leprechaun traits. And his face is starting to kind of morph now into looking very different than what he normally looked like. So at this point, Tammy runs back into him, and she's very distraught, and they um they end up discovering Mitch's body, and with the leprechaun as they go back up there to kind of talk to him, they find his body, and the leprechaun's lurking around at that moment as well. But they end up escaping, and Scott, who is now continue to transform into a leprechaun himself, leads them back, to the pawn shop in search of kind of answers and maybe a cure. So they get on the computer program that Gupta had found and trying to find all this information. Um, but back to Loretta now, who is now in the possession of the coin. She ends up using the coin to wish for like youth and beauty, and and once she turns into this like absolutely like beautiful woman, and like her hair's cut, she looks a lot different than what she was looking like in the movie. And she's kind of flaunting her new appearance to Fazio, and in the process, while she's like kind of showing herself off, Fazio steals the coin from her. um and now with Loretta vulnerable now with not having the coin, this causes her to lose all of her luck. And so the leprechaun kind of capitalizes on this by making her like body pretty much inflate. Like she gets huge tits and then huge ass and lips and everything, and she keeps inflating, and this ends up resulting in her whole body just exploding. And that's definitely probably one of the most memorable things, if not the most memorable thing of the whole movie. Um, and whenever I think of Caroline Williams, I always think of I think Texas Chainsaw 2 first, but then the second thing I'm going to think of is Leprechaun 3. Um, but anyway, back at the pawn shop, Scott and Tammy, they end up finding the Leprechaun's pot of gold, and this whole fight ensues with the leprechaun again, but they escape. And then Scott, his conditions is starting to worsen even more. And this, prompts Tammy to try to seek medical help at this hospital for him. And in the process, Leprechaun does take Tammy hostage, you know, there in the morgue of the hospital. And, he's demanding the coin from her. So because the leprechaun thinking that she has the coin now. Um, for some reason, I'm not sure why he was demanding because she doesn't have the coin, but but she but they do know where his pot of gold is. But anyway, Scott fully ends up transforming into this leprechaun, and he reveals that Fazio now possesses the coin. Um, and with the leprechaun now knowing this, he goes back to try to hunt down Fazio. And Fazio wishes to become the world's greatest magician. Um, and during his kind of midnight performance in the movie, the leprechaun ends up trapping Fazio in this box. It's used for a sawing in half trick. And the audience, believing that this is a part of the act, watches in horror as the leprechaun uh, pretty much bisects Fazio's box and his body with this chainsaw, and which is funny because Texas Chainsaw 2 with Carolyn Williams and the Leprechaun uses a chainsaw. I think that was intentional. I definitely think that was intentional, but of course, everything that happens within that moment, it just reveals that the magician's kind of gruesome fate, and it causes this kind of widespread panic amongst the audience and everybody. So Scott and Tammy and the audience, they're trying to escape the show, but Scott ends up confronting the leprechaun for one last time, and they end up burning the pot of gold, which kills the leprechaun, and it reverts Scott back to his human form. And as Scott and Tammy leave the casino, she reveals that she did find the coin, and she is tempted, but ultimately, chooses to let it go, and she throws the coin away. Um, yeah, I mean, that's the best that I can describe Leprechaun 3. There's a whole lot of stuff going on there. There's a lot of stuff that I left out, but I'm gonna try to touch up on that here as I conclude this review. Um, but it is, like I said, it's absolutely my favorite Leprechaun movie. It's just so quirky. It's got some of the most memorable kills in the movie. Um, just some of the best humor out of all the Leprechaun movies. And Warwick Davis again as the Leprechaun. He is the Leprechaun, and it's just he like what I mean by that is that of course it's Warwick Davis acting as the Leprechaun, but like it's like he becomes a part. He's so good in the role. It's like he becomes this completely different person. You know what I mean? Like I hope that makes sense. But 1 second, I'm freezing up for some reason. All right, there we go. Um, but he just kind of, of course, again brings that perfect blend of just like of menace and just sadism, I guess, and just a lot of that dark humor, and I absolutely, I love the humor that he portrays in this one especially. Um, and John Gattens, who plays Scott McCoy in this. Um, well, before I get to that, I wanted to mention one thing. There was something I did want to mention. So, like, um, in the scene with Warwick Davis, and this is where some of the humor comes into play. Um, in the scene where Mitch is in the hotel room and he's in the TV's on and everything, um, so these commercials come up on the TV. Like I said, they were kind of mocking popular commercials in the '90s at the time that were on actual TV, and this is one of the ones that's shown. So it's like 1-800 Will Sue. So you remember there was a ton of these in the '90s of all these different like lawyer commercials and stuff, and I thought that was really funny that they threw that in there. And then another one is donations, call 1-800 we burn you. So he's playing this preacher in this instant, and there's a lot of like I don't know if anybody remembers who Benny Hinn is. He was this like preacher that was always on TV, and I think he ended up being a huge con artist. But I think this is what this is making fun of here. Um, and then of course everybody remembers Miss Cleo in the commercials with Miss Cleo. There's even a documentary about her now. And so this is Athena Cosmos, psychic to the stars. And you see, and this is kind of like the attire that Miss Cleo would wear in those commercials. So, and he's got a little Ouija board there. It's just hilarious. I love that. Um, and also like when they get to the hospital as well, like there's this part where he's dressed up like one of the doctors, and he just walks right by them, and they don't even like act like it's anything out of the ordinary, which is just makes it even more ridiculous. um and also of course I have to mention this. uh It's where he runs into the Elvis impersonator, and they kind of have this back and forth, and the Leprechaun even does his own Elvis impersonation. And I just have to mention that definitely because my dad is a huge Elvis fan. And my dad was the reason that even watched these movies to begin with. So my dad, he really liked these movies back in the '90s, and I don't know how he feels about them now, but but my dad's still a huge Elvis fan, and definitely had to mention that. Um, but yeah, going on now to what I was talking about. John Gattens plays Scott McCoy in this, so he just kind of plays that that unfortunate soul who is caught in all of this ridiculous madness. Um, and he feels very relatable, and and he's a charming type of guy who makes the audience root for him. When even if he's making these kind of questionable decisions, and you see this kind of unfortunate thing start to happen to him where he's kind of morphed into this leprechaun. So you feel sorry for him too. And like I said, you're rooting for him, and you want him to not have to go through that, that ridiculousness. But But yeah, I mean, I really like this character, Scott, and that's he's another reason why I love this movie so much, and it's my favorite of the franchise. Just because of that whole idea of just having two leprechauns and like a leprechaun versus leprechaun showdown at the end of the movie is awesome to me. Um, and then the next character, man, I would love to know what happened to this girl, Lee Armstrong, who plays Tammy, because she's a very attractive girl in this movie. Very beautiful, and she's her character in this is very smart and very resourceful. And she's not like the typical damsel in distress or anything. She's actively involved in trying to stop the leprechaun, and something about her, like I've always thought this for a long time, as long as I knew who Barbara Crampton was. I always thought that she kind of had a very similar look to Barbara Crampton, and there's even a moment that kind of adds to that in the movie when she's like doing the strip tease for Mitch and all that. And let me go ahead and pull this picture up. So this is from that scene. Oh no, I'm sorry. This is not. This is from the outfit she's wearing because she's the magician's Fazio's assistant. But she is wearing that same like outfit up in the hotel with Mitch. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is that this she just kind of has a look to begin with. She kind of looks like Barbara Crampton, in my opinion. And in this whole look, I was like, it looks strikingly similar to the outfit that Barbara Crampton wears in From Beyond. So check this out. So here's Barbara Crampton from Beyond, and look at the outfit she's wearing. Just kind of look at her, just kind of look at her whole look there, and tell me that that's not similar to her. I mean, check that out. I mean, that's so cool. And I love Barbara Crampton too. I mean, like they look definitely similar. I don't know if that was kind of an influence for that look in the movie, but and I would just love to know what happened to this chick, Lee Armstrong, because I thought she did a great job in the movie. I thought she was very attractive. Um, but I don't remember seeing her in anything else beyond this. Um, if you guys know of anything, you track anything down her, let me know. I would love to see more of her work for sure. Hell yeah, what did I walk into? Daniel said. You walked into the middle of Leprechaun 3, me talking about Leprechaun 3. So if you're late coming in, Daniel, sorry about that, man. Like so you'll probably have to go back and watch the reviews of the first one and the second movie. But I'm just kind of trying to wrap up talking about Leprechaun 3 here. I was just going over the characters right now. And I was just talking about the character of Tammy, who's played by Lee Armstrong. And so also there's, I mentioned her earlier, Carolyn Williams, who played Loretta. Um, and, of course, Carolyn Williams, who's known for her role in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, is Stretch. Uh, I think she definitely brings a very memorable, kind of over the top performance of Loretta in Leprechaun 3. And just that whole scene with her as after she makes her wish and it kind of backfires on her was where she makes herself look all beautiful and everything and younger, and then kind of turns into this where she's got these huge inflated tits and her ass and her lips, and she kind of just turns into this really strange looking monstrosity. It's definitely one of Leprechaun 3's highlights. Definitely probably the most memorable one for me. And yeah, Daniel, you said this is your favorite one. Yeah, this is my favorite one as well. I think it's got some of the best humor, some of the best like this, the scenes with all these wishes that are backfiring on all these people. Um, it's so fun, man. I love it. And it takes place in Vegas, which is so ironic because it's a town that's full of greed, and you just got like this little leprechaun, this evil leprechaun running amok in this greed-filled town. It's just, I mean, it's genius. The whole thing is genius, and I think Brian Trenchard Smith, who directed this, he really knew what he was doing when it came to the story. Um, and of course, John DeMita, who plays Fazio, the sleazy magician who is just kind of desperate for fame. And Demita plays Fazio perfectly, I think, because he kind of comes off as really pathetic and uh, just this selfish bastard who kind of deserves this fate, this gruesome fate that he suffers, towards the end of the movie where he gets chainsawed in half and everything. So, and then of course Mitch, who played by Michael Callan, I think is his name. He embodies that whole greedy and just arrogant casino owner, I think, to a T. And he's just that kind of classic stereotypical villain that you love to hate, in these kinds of movies. And he kind of another guy that kind of gets what they deserve in the end. Um, and I've kind of covered it already, but like as far as the most memorable moments goes, but I definitely got to mention again, Scott, his transformation into a leprechaun is both kind of funny and kind of unsettling and you feel sorry for him in the whole situation. Um, and especially that whole, like, it's funny with the whole sudden cravings that he has for potatoes, and he has this very thick stereotypical Irish accent, and I think it's a huge part of the charm for this movie for sure. And the robot stripper, that electrocutes Mitch. It's just a very bizarre and creative kill, I think, as well, that that kind of encapsulates the film's like over the top type nature. Um, and I've mentioned this a few times now, but it's worth mentioning again. Loretta's death, her whole body inflating and exploding. Um, for me, that's got to be the most memorable thing in the entire movie, just because it's so, like, the effects of that is just so insanely awesome. Um, and just every time, like, I watch this movie and it gets to that part, I'm like, hell yeah, and I'm like zoned in on that because it's just so hilarious and it's so effective with the special effects. It's definitely unforgettable. Um, and the chainsaw magic trick with Fazio getting sawed in half, definitely another huge memorable moment for the movie. It's a classic B movie death, I think. And I mean, of course, all the one-liners that the Leprechaun has in the movie. I think just Warwick Davis is a huge part of that. I don't, like I said before, if Warwick Davis did not play this role, I don't think that this role would have worked and got as much attention that it has with fans, because he was genuinely casted perfectly for that role. Um, are you a sinner? Yeah, I just showed that. Let me pull that up again. There you go, Daniel. That's for you, man. Um, but yeah, like, this movie, there's so many things about it that's super memorable. But those are just a few, and just overall, Leprechaun 3, it might not be a masterpiece or anything, and I don't think any of these Leprechaun movies are truly masterpieces, but it has earned that cult following over the years, this dedicated cult following that, because it's just it's another example of that so bad it's good type of movie, and it's definitely rewatchable. I couldn't tell you how many times that I've watched this particular entry in the franchise, because just it has this kind of over the top gore, it's ridiculous plot, and just, I know this is a continuing thing with me, but I love Warwick Davis. I'm such a huge fan of him. He's one of my bucket list people to meet at a convention. I've not got to meet him yet, but man, I'll probably lose my shit if I ever meet Warwick Davis. Um, he's iconic in this, and just his performance in this again, and just it really cements its place in horror comedy history for sure. Um, just and the movie really contributed to the Leprechauns franchise's reputation, just for all these kind of outlandish scenarios. Um, and I think there's some people I've heard talk about uh, this entry in particular and say it's kind of a decline in quality and whatever. It's what that's what I say. That's just whatever, man. Like because to me, I think it is amazing because I embrace that absurdity that kind of goes with this movie. Um, and I know like other people are the same way. My friend Daniel here, he also he loves it. This is his favorite as well as he said. Um, and yeah, I was talking about that as well, Daniel. Yeah, how I wasn't the only guy he liked was Elvis, and yeah, because I talked about that too, and because I had to mention that because my dad's a big Elvis fan, and that's the only guy. You're right, Daniel. That's the only guy that he let go. He didn't try to kill him or anything. He liked his style. They liked each other's style, so I love that scene. That's another super memorable scene for the movie. Um, but Leprechaun 3, overall is just it's a reminder, another reminder that horror doesn't always have to be serious. Sometimes you just need a killer leprechaun and bad wishes and a whole lot of blood and laughs and if you're looking for another fun, just cheesy and just thoroughly entertaining horror movie, you can't go wrong with Leprechaun 3. Um, just remember to leave the medallion on the statue and maybe keep a potato handy. So, yeah, never can be too sure. But up next, the franchise definitely takes a huge turn. Um, as we are going now into Leprechaun 4 and Leprechaun 4 and be more specific, Leprechaun 4 in space. And this is from 1996. And so I'm going to try to dissect wha- this this movie that is batshit insanity. So, um, Leprechaun 4 in space. Yeah, you heard me right, in space. And yes, it's just as glorious and as hilarious, and it's as wonderfully terrible as you're imagining. Because as a lifelong horror fan, who just kind of appreciates both like scares and just that sheer audacity of just filmmaking gone wild. Um, this movie really hits in all the right and wrong places at the same time. Daniel, you said the only thing you liked was the lightsaber. Yeah, well, I'll get to that. I mean, I like that part as well. But honestly, man, I don't dislike this movie. I actually have a lot of fun with this movie. Um, but the director of Leprechaun 4 Space is again Brian Trenchard Smith, who did Leprechaun 3. So that might be a big part of why I like this one as well. I mean, I know a lot of people hate this one. The effects are kind of really lame and cheesy, but to me, that's just another part of its charm. But Brian Trenchard Smith, like I said, he was this filmmaker who just embraces the fun of the genre, and just I think that sensibility is definitely on display in Leprechaun 4 because he's not afraid to get weird, and he seems to kind of know exactly the kind of tone that this movie needed to achieve, in my opinion. Um, and the kills in this are very creative once again and hilarious. There's actually a kill in this that I'll get to. Is probably one of the most memorable kills in the entire franchise. I don't see how you could fucking forget this kill. Um, but the dialogue in this is is quotable. I think in all the wrong ways. And Warwick Davis again, bless his heart. He's clearly having the time of his life in this one. So you could forget the serious horror icons for a minute. This is the Leprechaun, and he's blasting off somebody's head with a laser gun, and he's got pulls out a fucking lightsaber, and he's just all at the same time he's delivering these perfectly timed one-liners. I mean, how can you not love that? How can you not? Um, But so the story for this movie goes in it's this distant future of the year 2096 on this, which is damn, that's just like 70 years from now. Uh, they're like kind of on this unnamed planet, and our favorite rhyme loving, gold obsessed leprechaun is up to his old tricks again. He's trying to scheme his way into control of this entire planet. So, and his plan by this is to marry this princess, this alien princess named Zarina, and she's like, so she's this royal princess of this planet that the leprechaun is trying to take control of. And not for love, of course, but for just the power and this stash of treasures. But unbeknownst to the leprechaun, the princess has this same idea in store. Um, but unfortunately for the Leprechaun and Zarina, this platoon of these kind of stereotypical space marines ends up crashing the party. And I'll say this, like this movie is like the Leprechaun meets Starship Troopers, meets Star Wars, um, I don't know, meets a bunch of other fucking crazy shit. Um, But like I said, these space marines who end up crashing the party, they're there for this kind of mining operation, and because the planet is just rich in gold, of course, and that's one of the reasons why the Leprechaun is wanting to take over this planet. And they end up quickly trying to to get rid of the Leprechaun. They're firing at it, and they end up blowing him up. Um, so this one Marine named Lucky tries to steal his pot of gold, but before they take out the leprechaun, of course. Before he tries to steal his pot of gold. The leprechaun ends up killing Lucky with this green lightsaber that the leprechaun pulls out, and that's the Star Wars aspect of it, and definitely, because I think that was a kind of a nod to the background that Warwick Davis had, because Warwick Davis was just a teenager when he was in Return of the Jedi as Wicket the Ewok. So just to kind of bring that lightsaber to the mix, that was definitely a nod to his Star Wars background. Um, but like I said, the leprechaun does end up getting killed, or not really killed. I mean, they think he's killed, but there's this grenade that gets thrown, and the leprechaun jumps on the grenade, and it blows him to smithereens. Um, so Kowalski, which is another one of the Marines, he ends up going to piss on the corpse, and this kind of seals his fate because in the moment of this kind of this sheer cinematic absurdity, um, the leprechaun spirit travels up Kowalski's piss stream into his dick. I mean, I'm just gonna say it. His spirit goes into Kowalski's dick, and so the Marines, they end up, they go back to the ship, and they're kind of oblivious of all this. So, and they're taking the injured Princess Zarina with them back on board with them to kind of examine her. And the commander of the ship, who is half cyborg, named Doctor Mittenhand, you know, kind of has plans of his own. So he wants to use Zarina's regenerative DNA because she can regenerate parts of her body. So he wants to use that ability that she has within her DNA to kind of rebuild his own mutilated body, because where he's half cyborg and he's just kind of barely holding on. Um, so back on the ship, the leprechaun ends up bursting. There's a scene where he bursts out of Kowalski's dick, and that's how he comes back into the world. And that's the scene I was talking about. That's the probably one of the most memorable like kills in the entire franchise, is because I mean because it's so absurd, and it just kind of leaves you like shocked. Like I was like, that leprechaun just burst out of that dude's dick. I mean, but it's something else, guys. I mean, it has to be seen to believe. Um, But from there, it's on after that. There's this kind of blood-soaked rampage as the Leprechaun, stalking the ship and all of these troops, just kind of turning this sci-fi setting into his own like personal playground of horrors. Um, and he ends up, killing off these crew members using a variety of different methods. Uh, you know, and because he like uses a laser to kind of create this barbecue. There's this one guy, Harold. He ends up like does something. He flattens that guy's face, and he looks like Drop Dead Fred. Um, and I wish I had saved a picture to pull that up, show you guys, because that's really crazy. But if you've never seen that, you gotta watch Leprechaun 4 just for some of the most unique kills and sequences in a Leprechaun movie that there is. So anyway, the Leprechaun is on this pursuit of Zarina, and this ends up leading him to Dr. Mittenhand. And so the Leprechaun, he ends up injecting him with this kind of cocktail of Zarina's DNA and the remains of this kind of blended scorpion and tarantula. So when I say he injects this into Dr. Mittenhand. So after that, happens, the ship begins its kind of self destruct countdown, and this one Marine named Sticks, who's played by Miguel Nunez, he ends up trying to stop it, but is stopped by Mittenhand, who is now um, transformed into this like mutant spider scorpion creature, and I think this is also the first. I forgot to mention this. This is the first Leprechaun movie where we have like two villains, two like type of monsters at the same time. Um, and but granted that Dr. Mittenhand doesn't turn into the spider scorpion hybrid monster or whatever until the end, though. But like I said, Sticks ends up getting trapped in this web or whatever it is, that the Dr. Mittenhand mutant monster has concocted. And meanwhile, while this is happening, the other survivors are trying to confront the Leprechaun, and is over in the cargo bay. So accidentally they shoot him with this kind of experimental growth ray that they were using to kind of like regenerate body parts and stuff for Dr. Mittenhand. So this ends up causing the leprechaun to grow and turn into this like huge giant leprechaun. Um, and Tina Reeves, who is the ship's biologist, ends up rescuing Sticks from the Mittenhand creature with by freezing him with this like liquid nitrogen, and then he shatters. And so this movie came out in, what was it, 96? So when did Jason X come out? I can't remember. I want to say the late 90s or early 2000s, and I remember like when I watched this, and that whole scene where the Dr. Mittenhand creature gets that liquid nitrogen sprayed on him, and then he's shattered. There's there's a scene similar to that where Jason does this kill in Jason X, where he like pushes this chick's head in like this liquid nitrogen sink, and then pulls it out and just like shatters her face on the counter. And I always wondered if they kind of like borrowed that idea from Leprechaun 4, but I don't know. Who knows? But I always thought that was a cool kill in Jason X. Um, but back to the movie now. Sorry about that. Um, so like the only other surviving Marine at this point is also the character named Books, and he ends up opening this airlock, and it sucks the giant leprechaun out into space. And so as he's going out in space, all the the no gravity, there's no oxygen, so this ends up causing his body to explode. And right as it's happening, the self destruction countdown is still happening, and the remaining survivors are trying to correctly guess this password to stop that whole self destruct sequence. And the password ends up being Wizard because the character Harold, which I know I didn't talk about him much, but he's kind of a minor character, but he always referred to himself as this wizard, and that ended up being the password to stop the self destruct sequence. And so Books and Reeves, they end up stopping the self destruct, and they kind of share this kiss, and then as they look out into the window into space, uh, the leprechaun's hand comes floating by and gives the middle finger, just kind of adding an additional touch of that ridiculous humor of the Leprechaun movies. Um, but yeah, and Daniel, you mentioned it up here in the chat, giant middle finger that you see all the pics. Yeah, like the effect of it is like super, really super bad, but it's just it's grown on me so much over the years. I love that. It's so cheesy and stupid, but it definitely works for me. um, but yeah, I guess let's talk about a little of these characters. So, of course, Warwick Davis again. I mean, what can we say about Warwick Davis as a Leprechaun that's not already been said already? He's always again that heart and soul of the Leprechaun franchise. Um, and he just kind of brings that that sadistic energy to this role, and just a lot of that very charismatic sense of just gusto, and just kind of reveling in that over the top gore with the character. I mean, and he's exploding out of people's dicks, and it's just that he's got a lightsaber and a laser pistol, and it's just Warwick Davis is he's a master of physical comedy. And just his performance here is, a really again elevates this movie. If it weren't for him, this would just be a throwaway movie that I would not care about. But because everything that happens in this movie, happens with Warwick Davis as the Leprechaun, um, it just keeps it being, instead of just simply truly awful, but awful and entertaining at the same time. If that makes sense. Maybe I'm just biased. I don't know, because I'm such a huge fan of these movies. Um, but of course, you also got Rebecca Carlton, who does play Princess Zarina in this. She's just that alien princess who gets caught in this whole plot from the Leprechaun, is like his web of greed and lust. And um, this lady that plays Zarina, Rebecca Carlton, she's absolutely stunning in this. She's very beautiful as well. Don't really know what happened to her either. Her or Lee Armstrong from Leprechaun 3. Don't know what happened to these chicks that were in these Leprechaun movies, other than Jennifer Aniston in the first one. I mean, we all know what happened with her. But Zarina, the character of Zarina in this, she's very cunning and ambitious, and just um and she just, at the same time, she's kind of scheming to kill the Leprechaun for his gold, and so she, just wants to take over the planet for herself. And she possesses these regenerative abilities that kind of become this really sought after commodity as a part of the plot. And she just, the Rebecca Carlton that plays her, just kind of plays her with that kind of regal demeanor, and just it really makes her a very compelling character. I mean, somewhat underutilized, I think, in the plot, but I mean, the scenes with her, I mean, I really thought they were entertaining. I really enjoyed her character. Um, so Brent Jasmer, who plays the staff sergeant Books, he is kind of that level-headed leader of this Mar- Space Marine squad, I guess, if you will. And he is the kind of the epitome of that classic military hero. He's brave and he's resourceful, and he kind of looks has a like a young Sylvester Stallone almost look to him, especially towards the end when he's got his shirt off and everything. He's kind of running around like Rambo. So maybe that's what they were going for. I don't know, but like I said, he's kind of determined to protect his crew in this whole situation, and he's a by the books kind of guy, thus the name Books, I guess. Um, and I don't know, he's a very interesting character. Then Jessica Collins, who plays Dr. Tina Reeves, um, she is the ship's kind of the this biological officer, I guess, that is kind of slash scientist. I don't know, but she's like their resident science expert. That kind of provides these solutions to battle against the leprechauns' antics, and she's smart and ultimately kind of plays that crucial role in saving the day. Um, and then Guy Seiner, I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name, but he plays Dr. Mittenhand. And he's just that, the mad scientist, classic mad scientist in this time with a cyborg body, and just he's also got kind of a knack for playing God, with trying to use Zarina's regenerative abilities to kind of regenerate his own body. And like I said, he's the film's secondary villain, and he's like this is the first time they've ever really done this in a Leprechaun movie, and I just thought that was interesting, especially, and I love when he goes to that whole transformation to the mitten spider scorpion creature. It's definitely a highlight, I think, in the film with when that happens, and the special effects used on that is very cheesy, but also super enjoyable for me. Um, and then you got a few other characters like he was like the one of the sergeants, I guess, for the Marines. His name was Metalhead or something like that. I think because he had like half of his head was like metal, and he almost looked like a really a knockoff Kano or something from Mortal Kombat. Um, so he's kind of this like no nonsense, veteran soldier, and he's just kind of this tough as nails sergeant who kind of is part of the comedic relief, I guess, in the movie, and he kind of has this over the top macho vibe about him, and just some very like colorful comments that he makes in the movie. Um, but that whole macho vibe that he presents is funny because it's ironic, I guess, because later in the movie, he kind of comes under this spell by the leprechaun, where he ends up. There's this whole scene where he's like dressed in drag and he's acting kind of more feminine, and it's just I mean, that type of thing nowadays is probably considered non PC or whatever. But I mean, that stuff was everywhere. That kind of humor was everywhere back then in like the 90s and even the 80s and all that. I mean, and you know, people just weren't doing that to be offensive or anything, but it was just it was just good comedy, like good clean comedy, and which there's good clean comedy in this, but there's also very like dark and over the top comedy, like leprechauns exploding out of people's dicks. I mean that's something you don't see every day, and in anything at all. So I think that's one of the things that makes this movie very unique. And then also, like I said, Miguel Nunez is in this. He plays Private Sticks, and he's another comic relief type character. Um, and but he ultimately does prove his worth in the end by helping them kind of save the day. And I love Miguel Nunez. I mean, he's also not only known for this, but of course, Return of the Living Dead, and Friday the 13th Part 5. I think I talked about him um, not long ago because he was. It's actually last week when I was doing the March Madness videos because I mentioned Juwanna Mann as another basketball movie and that he was in, and for some reason I had forgot about that till I think it was Daniel. I think it was Daniel here in the chat that had mentioned Juwanna Mann, and I totally forgot about that movie till last week. Um, but definitely some of the most memorable things about this movie, because said the Star Wars background with Warwick Davis, where he was in Return of the Jedi, and he was in those Ewok movies, and he kind of brought that back into play in this at the beginning of the film, where he has a lightsaber, um, just very ridiculous, nonsense type stuff, but definitely appeals to me. Um, and I know I've mentioned this like 100 times now, but the leprechaun bursting out of Kowalski's dick. I mean, this is, I think, without a doubt, one of the most infamous scenes in the entire Leprechaun franchise. There's nothing like it. There is nothing like this in the rest of the Leprechaun movies. It's just so bizarre and over the top, and it's impossible to forget. I mean, I'll probably remember that scene for the rest of my life. Um, and oh, the of course the giant leprechaun when he becomes the giant and he gets sucked into space. Just that whole visual of this oversized leprechaun just kind of flailing like all over the place as he's pulled into the vacuum of space. It's a thing of beauty. It truly is. Just and the leprechaun, as it explodes and you see his hand, he's giving the middle finger in space. It's just a kind of a last fuck you from the leprechaun, as he floats away. Um, so Leprechaun 4, I mean, it has become, I think, well, a lot of fans are on the fence with this one, but I think, in my opinion, it's a cult classic. It's a super fun horror comedy, and there's a lot of other fans like me who really appreciate its kind of sheer audacity and just that kind of commitment to ridiculousness. It's another prime example, my even more so I think with this one is of that so bad it's good type filmmaking, and just that it's definitely a testament to that power of low budget creativity. And uh, this it's definitely not a film that's going to win any kind of awards or anything. Maybe a Razzie Award. He might win a Razzie Award, but it's not going to win any kind of Oscars or anything like that. But it's a movie that's just, I think, can entertain you, can shock you, make you question your life choices. Um, it's a reminder, another reminder, like I've said before, that horror doesn't always have to be serious or scary, or sometimes it can just be plain silly and fun. And a lot of times that's one of the things I enjoy most about those type of horror films is just when stuff is just plain silly and fun. I mean, um, because I'm the type of guy that's just, I can't be serious all the time. If I were to try to be serious about just take stuff serious all the time, I mean, I think I would be fucking miserable. And with the way my personality is, um, I just couldn't do it. So I gotta have this like silliness every once in a while in my life, and it's so fun this week watching these movies again. I mean, because I absolutely love these Leprechaun movies. It's because this film, much like the other ones in the franchise, has this very kind of self-aware humor. And they definitely know what they're doing. They're all everything that's in the movie is intentionally as stupid as it's supposed to be. Um, and I think all of that just resonates with the whole like group of just these horror fans who just appreciate that. Um, and but that's Leprechaun 4, in a nutshell. I mean, there's so much more to the movie that I could talk about, but like I said, I'm trying to keep this as brief as possible, just because I had so many movies to talk about tonight. Um, but up next, the Leprechaun franchise takes another huge turn in the franchise, as now we're going to talk about the insane world of Leprechaun in the Hood. And this is from the year 2000, and I absolutely love this movie. I mean, it is so bizarre. It is so ridiculously funny. I mean, just like they, because I'm also a huge fan of like the of hip hop music from the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and I love watching a lot of these like kind of black culture type movies. I love like Boys in the Hood. I love the Friday movies. I love New Jack City. Um, and a lot of like the comedies that kind of make fun of those, like Don't Be a Menace to South Central while drinking your juice, or I think that's what it's called, like the Wayans brother movie, and just so many movies like that. I love to this day. And just that they kind of like spoof all of that in this and mix it with horror, and it's just this really insane, bizarre blend of these two types of genres together that you would never think would work. And to a lot of people, it doesn't. There's a lot of people that think that these movies are absolutely ridiculous and stupid, and just they have no interest. Um, and I will say, spoiler alert, but the sequel to this one, Back to the Hood, is probably my least favorite Leprechaun movie in the franchise, but it's I'll get into that reason when I get there. But as far as the first one, Leprechaun in the Hood from 2000, um, it really this movie holds a special place in my weird little heart, man. Um, it's very outrageous. It's inventive at the same time, and it's unapologetically itself. Um, and it just really has a very demented brilliance to it. Um, so the director of this was was brought to us by Rob Sparrow, and he's definitely not like a household name or anything, but I think he really understood the assignment here with Leprechaun in the Hood. Um, so he kind of leans, into that absurdity by just kind of letting the ridiculousness of this premise of a movie kind of fuel the whole experience for the audience. Um, and give me one second, I gotta get a drink real quick. Oh yeah. So anyway, the story of this movie, it kicks off in Los Angeles in the year 1980, and we meet Mac Daddy Onassis, who is played by, Ice T, and he is a pimp with a name that's as subtle as a sledgehammer. But Mac Daddy Onassis and his associate Slug, they kind of stumble upon this hidden chamber, which is kind of brimmed with gold and all that. And even better, they find the leprechaun statue. And Slug rips off the medallion off the statue to kind of take it for himself, and the curse is then unleashed when the leprechaun comes alive and kills Slug. Um, but again, Mac Daddy ends up trapping the leprechaun by getting the medallion necklace back onto the leprechaun, and he takes the the leprechaun's flute. Um, and that flute ends up playing a big part in this movie. So fast forward now 20 years later, and so we're kind of introduced to our heroes, I guess, of the movie. So first off, Postmaster P, which I do not know how they didn't get sued for that because of the actual rapper Master P. That seems like something they would try to sue them over. And then his friends Stray Bullet and Butch. And they're just these kind of three aspiring rappers who were struggling to catch a break. And after this kind of failed audition and this very desperate and unsuccessful attempt to pawn off this Jimi Hendrix guitar, um, which is obviously a newer guitar, and Jimi Hendrix died in 1970, so it obviously didn't belong to him. Um, and that's another thing. Like, this is another pawn, the whole pawn shop thing. Like, this is the third movie in the Leprechaun franchise where a pawn shop is featured. Um, and I think I think they do that because of the whole like um, people's greed and wanting money and stuff, and it kind of just plays into the whole Leprechaun lore with him being greedy and always obsessed with his gold, and so I don't know. But anyway, after this, they cross paths with Mac Daddy, who is now this successful record producer, seemingly because of the flute that he stole from the Leprechaun, and we'll learn more about that flute here in a little bit. Um, so he's now like Mac Daddy's rebuffed after refusing to sell out. The friends break into Mac Daddy's studio for revenge, and when this happens, chaos just erupts, and Postmaster P, who accidentally uh, shoots Mac Daddy, who survives thanks to a necklace. And in this kind of ensuing panic, Butch accidentally frees the Leprechaun again by removing the amulet. So now the Leprechaun is back, and he's on this mission to retrieve his magical flute, which naturally puts anyone who hears the music coming from it into this kind of trance, this hypnotizing trance. And so the Leprechaun enlists his zombie fly girls, which is a trio of these hypnotized women, for his dirty work. And of course, Mac Daddy also wants that flute back, which makes him this kind of unwilling ally to the heroes of the story. Um, so the Leprechaun ends up, as always, leaving a kind of trail of bodies behind him as he's killing all these people off left and right. And the he ends up like Reverend Hanson, the preacher there in town, the pawn shop owners, and then also this friend of theirs who is a transgender character, which was kind of something very new to the franchise as well, named Fontaine, and this kind of and they're all killed in these kind of really increasingly creative and very gruesome ways. Um, but the friends end up deciding to enter in this hip hop contest for a shot at going to Vegas. So Vegas comes into play again in the franchise, and just to and they're trying to get a record deal. So the Leprechaun ends up finding them and tries to make Stray Bullet kill Butch for the flute, but they refuse. And Postmaster P ends up handing over the flute, um, only for the Leprechaun to go back on his deal, and he forces Stray Bullet to shoot himself in the head with a gun. Um, so devastated by this, Butch convinces Postmaster P, to fight back, and they devise this kind of plan to try to mellow out the Leprechaun by having him smoke some weed. So they roll up this joint and they lace it with 4-leaf clovers, hoping to weaken the Leprechaun enough to steal the flute back from him. And and in a turn of events, they disguise themselves in drag, and they go to this club where the Leprechaun is hiding at. And when they get there, they come face to face with these zombie fly girls, and they have the fly girls smoke this joint with the 4-leaf clovers, and it ends up breaking the Leprechaun's spell over them. So after this, they end up finding the Leprechaun upstairs, who ends up wanting the dressed up and drag Postmaster P to give him a blowjob. And the leprechaun smokes the joint and then loses consciousness and passes out. And after this, they avenge Stray Bullet and they take the flute and they head downstairs to escape. So Mac Daddy ends up being there at the same time and kind of intercepts them on this, and he shoots Butch, and this kills, and it's kind of sad, but it's also hilarious at the same time because Butch is still in the drag outfit, and he's like, I don't want to die looking like this or something like that. Um, but uh, but then after this, Postmaster P ends up retaliating by shooting Mac Daddy 3 times, and now no longer under the effects of the clover joint, um, the leprechaun comes downstairs and uses his magic to pin Postmaster P against this kind of like steel girder or whatever it is. And Postmaster P, he distracts the leprechaun, allowing this bullet-ridden Mac Daddy to suddenly, he still survived after these gunshots, and it causes him to, and so he comes up behind the leprechaun and hits the leprechaun with this like wooden chair, but it doesn't really affect the leprechaun. He just kind of uses his magic to explode Mac Daddy's torso. Um, but with his last breath, Mac Daddy throws the magic amulet into the air, and we don't never see the amulet come down onto the leprechaun, but it just kind of cuts to this ending of the film where Postmaster P is now this successful rapper. However, when it shows him and he removes his sunglasses, his eyes turn green, and so it kind of reveals that this indication that the leprechaun has him under his spell now and is now his manager. Um, and the movie ends with the leprechaun doing this rap about being an evil leprechaun and taking over the world and all that, or the music world. It's a Lip in the Hood, do no good, or something like that. It's really goofy, but it's just entertaining, just because I can't say this enough, and I know you guys are probably tired of hearing it, but Warwick Davis is just a fucking legend. Um, and just um, I mean, I've never watched a movie with Warwick Davis that I didn't like. I mean, there's the Return of the Jedi, Willow, the Leprechaun movies, the Harry Potter movies. Um, he was in, he was off. He played in other Star Wars movies as different characters. Like he was in Rogue. I think Rogue One. No, was it Rogue One or was he in Solo? I can't remember which one but he was in one of those. And then he also played a little Rodian character that was that was friends with Anakin in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And just every character, I've always loved Warwick Davis. So hopefully I'll get to meet him one of these days. But speaking of Warwick Davis, though, again, he's back in this, of course, as a leprechaun, and just you could tell that he is having so much fun with this role and the whole like scenario with all it, because with this installment of the franchise, I mean, it comes off, the character comes off as more like cartoonishly evil, and even more prone to rhyming than usual that he does in the rest of the previous movies. um and just kind of throw in that whole culture in there where he's smoking weed and just kind of making these really inappropriate demands of getting a blowjob, and it's just I don't know, it's really over the top ridiculousness, and I love it, absolutely love it. um So Ice-T though, as Mac Daddy Onassis, Ice-T really brings this kind of his signature cool, to the role of Mac Daddy, and he's just this kind of former hustler that's turned into a like successful record producer, and he's equal parts menacing and charismatic, and he just kind of plays that role with a perfect blend of just seriousness and self awareness, and his pursuit of that flute makes him just kind of that like a villain in a sense. I mean, he is he's like a but he's more not really a villain, but he's more of kind of like just an anti-hero in this. And I think his death scene in the movie is probably one of the film's most memorable deaths. Just because seeing Ice T's guts explode, just is it's pretty memorable. Um, and you got, Anthony Montgomery, who plays Postmaster P. He starts out, as the film's hero and everything. He's just this inspiring rapper who dreams of making it big without kind of compromising his integrity. And however, his kind of desperation for that success, leads him down this kind of dark path and just results in the death of his friends and and his own kind of eventual enslavement to the leprechaun. Um, but his friends, so one of them being Stray Bullet, who's played by Rashawn Nall, and he's just a member of Postmaster P's rap group. He's kind of the most impulsive of the group, and and the most naive as well. Um, and just his kind of tragic fate in the movie kind of serves as that cautionary tale, I think, about just the dangers of greed and desperation. So yeah, that's never a good thing. Never a good thing to hold on to. And then Red Grant, who plays Butch. So Butch is the comic relief, I think, of the trio here. He's a bit kind of dim-witted but he's a very loyal friend, and he kind of, he provides a lot of the film's humor aside from the scenes with the leprechaun. Um, and so it's just his character is just kind of over the top, I think, in the best possible way for this film. And there's definitely a cameo I think that's worth mentioning. It's only like it's a blink and you miss it moment, but in the scene where they're in the church rapping, and he uses the flute to kind of hypnotize the crowd because they're not into the rapping and everything that they're doing, so they try to leave. But then Postmaster P uses the flute and it kind of hypnotizes everybody in the church and they come back and sit down. And then this also causes other people to come in from outside that's hearing them do the rapping and all that. And one of them is Coolio. So yeah, so Coolio ends up making this very like bizarre but hilarious cameo in the film. Um, and like I said, as far as some of the most memorable moments for this, just the leprechauns rapping, like I said, towards the end of the movie, or at the end of the movie. Um, they're awful. The raps are awful, but I think that's also another part of the charm here with this one, because I think it's intentionally done that way to it's where it's so bad it's good, um, and just that sheer audacity of just having this demonic leprechaun rap about gold and weed and all kinds of stuff like that. It's really something you kind of have to see to believe. Um, and of course, the zombie fly girls concept is pretty funny. It's just like these half naked women who's under the leprechaun's control. Um, and the four leaf clover joint. I mean, I got to mention that. That's something I never thought I would see is the leprechaun smoking a joint in the Leprechaun franchise, and that just kind. I think this movie got so over with such a certain group of people, and they found it so hilarious. I think just the filmmakers too. Everybody involved with this. Warwick Davis himself really loves this one. I know if you can get an autograph through Warwick Davis's website, like one of the options you can choose for that he will write on the autograph is the line from this movie, "A friend with weed is a friend indeed." So, so I think he really definitely embraced this whole everything surrounding this movie, and just that plan to get the leprechaun high on that weed laced with the four leaf clover is just so ridiculous and genius at the same time. Um, And just of course, I gotta mention, the Mac Daddy's explosive death, where his torso just kind of exploded from the leprechaun's magic, and just seeing that is super memorable in itself because it happens to Ice T, and that can't tell you in any other movie that Ice T's been in there where that happens to him. So definitely, definitely memorable and unforgettable in that sense. Um, but Leprechaun in the Hood is definitely, I think, for a must watch for anybody that's fans of the previous films of the Leprechaun movies. If you just kind of like that whole horror blended with black exploitation type stuff, I mean, it's definitely just absurd, but it's a healthy dose of absurdity. And it's a wild ride from start to finish. I mean, it's filled with like creative kills and quotable lines, and just again, as always, an unforgettable performance by Warwick Davis. Um, it just it's another movie that never takes itself too seriously, which allows it to be very genuinely entertaining. Um, and like I said, there's a lot of people that kind of scoff at the silliness of this one and just the whole movie in general. But for me, it's a fantastic blend of horror and comedy, and just the over the top violence, and just that kind of embrace of the early 2000s hip hop culture. And I just think it's really made it beloved amongst several fans like myself. And if you're a fan of horror comedies or black exploitation or just plain weird movies, then Leprechaun in the Hood is definitely worth checking out. Um, yeah, Daniel, I agree. For sure people do get butt hurt these days. Uh, and you say, why every time you say dicks, I crack up. I don't know, man. Dicks is a funny word, though, especially when you're talking about it when a leprechaun is bursting out of them. So, for real, though, I mean, like, that is anybody that sees Leprechaun 4, though, is never going to forget that. I mean, it's so bizarre and outrageous. But anyway, moving on now to the last movie of the night and the last Leprechaun movie that featured Warwick Davis. So I might be a little bit short on this particular um, review. So this is Leprechaun Back to the Hood from 2003. And so just keep in mind, this is not uh, one of my favorites of the Leprechaun franchise. This is actually my least favorite. And when I say least favorite, that means it's the one that I enjoy the least. So I still do enjoy this movie. Don't get me wrong. I do like this movie to an extent. Like it's something that I have watched several times. Um, if I really don't like a movie and I have no desire um, to ever watch it again, then I'm not even going to refer it as a favorite. So that's why when I say least favorite for this one, I'm not saying that I dislike the movie because I do like this movie, but it's just the one that I'm least entertained by. So just wanted to make that clear. Um, but to put it mildly, Leprechaun Back to the Hood is a very divisive entry in the Leprechaun franchise. And, while it kind of attempts to inject that kind of fresh dose of just that urban flavor like Leprechaun in the Hood had, this one definitely kind of falls short, I think, resulting in kind of this film that's kind of inconsistent at times and, kind of disappointing for a lot of fans of the franchise. Um, and like I said, this is I'm not particularly fond of this movie, but I do like the parts with the leprechaun. and that's why I continue to watch this one. I've watched this one multiple times. But my main issue with this one is that the Leprechaun isn't really featured as prominently as he should be in this one. But the times that he is on screen, however, they are the best scenes in the movie. Warwick Davis really, he just delivers some genuinely hilarious and memorable moments, kind of just which really gives this film its only real saving grace, in my opinion. Um, and you know, I find myself wishing that the movie had focused more on the Leprechaun's antics and just less on the kind of convoluted plot that was going on surrounding the gold in the movie. But it is what it is. I still like I said, I still enjoy it for the parts with Warwick Davis as the Leprechaun in this, um, and because when they're the best parts in the movie. But this one was directed by Steven, and I do not know how to pronounce his last name. It's like Aram Louis or something. I don't know. You'd have to look at Google who directed Leprechaun Back to the Hood, and you try to pronounce that for yourself. Um, but yeah, Daniel, he did kill a guy with a bong in this one, and then he hit the bong. So yeah, like I said, I mean, not crazy about this movie, but it definitely with the stuff with the Leprechaun, it definitely, you know, it still makes it watchable for me. Um, but and yeah, I agree. Warwick is the man. Let's see, what did you say up here? You said I see him as a detective. He plays in Rick and Morty too. See him punch on SVU. I never watched any of those shows. I've never watched Rick and Morty. I've never seen those Law and Order shows that Ice T's on. Um, I don't know. I just never was too interested in watching them. But who knows? I mean, I watch new stuff all the time. So, um, been recently wanting to start The Sopranos. I've never watched The Sopranos, but I hear so many people talk about that show, saying it's like one of the greatest shows of all time. I've never seen it, so yeah, I've been thinking about starting it here soon. Right now, I'm rewatching Sons of Anarchy, so maybe once I finish that up, I'll start The Sopranos. Um, but as I was saying about the director, though, he's not particularly well known for a large body of work. He's kind of primarily known for directing low budget horror and I think thriller films and stuff like that. But um, Leprechaun Back to the Hood is probably his most recognizable movie that he's done. Um, and the story of this kind of begins with this kind of animated prologue, which is narrated by the character that's the psychic in this movie, Esmeralda. And it just kind of it goes into these origins of leprechauns, and she tells of how in ancient times this king summoned many leprechauns to protect his gold, and after the king died, all these leprechauns returned to like their point of origin, in the woods and different places like that, except for one particular leprechaun who became evil over time and hell bent on like guarding the treasure and stuff. So fast forward this to present day in Los Angeles. There's this priest, Father Jacob, or a pastor, or whatever he is, um, who discovers this gold while working at the site for a youth center he's hoping to build. And in the struggle with this leprechaun, Father Jacob manages to banish, the creature using holy water and four leaf clovers, and summoning these demonic hands that drag him beneath the earth. However, that fight ends up proving fatal for Father Jacob, and he ends up succumbing to his injuries and dying. So a year later, we meet this character named Emily Woodrow and her and Lisa Duncan, and these are two friends who visit Esmeralda for a psychic reading. And Esmeralda warns them that they will soon come into great wealth, but cautions them against accepting it, as it will bring, this terrible evil upon them. And later, at a barbecue at the abandoned youth center site, Emily, along with her friends Lisa and this guy named Jamie, who's always stoned, and her ex boyfriend turned drug dealer Rory Jackson, who is played by the guy that plays MM on The Boys. Um, and they discovered, the leprechaun's hidden gold after Emily falls through this hole. And so once they find the gold, they decide to split the loot, and each of these four friends indulges in all their like kind of wildest fantasies. Unfortunately, they're unaware that they have unleashed this leprechaun in the process, and he just begins kind of stalking them, and starting with this kind of unfortunate guest at Jamie's house who's impaled with a bong, like Daniel was talking about, and and the leprechaun reclaims his first coin. So the police end up arresting Jamie, and accuse him of the murder. So while released and after escaping the leprechaun, Emily, Rory, and Jamie go to Lisa's home, where they discover that she had been clawed to death. And Emily and Jamie want to return the gold, but Rory refuses and runs off with it. So Emily is then chased outside by the leprechaun, but is saved when Rory has a change of heart and returns. Um, the leprechaun finds Rory's house and kills his girlfriend Chanel by because she has this gold tooth, and he tears out her jaw, which is brutal as hell. And he reclaims that gold that she used to make that tooth. So Emily and Roy are harassed by these police officers, Thompson and Whitaker, and when the leprechaun appears and kills the officers, Emily and Rory escape, and they regroup with Jamie, only be confronted by Rory's drug dealing rivals, which are led by these guys named Watson and Cedric. And Watson and his gang are killed off one by one by the leprechaun, while Emily and Rory and Jamie drive off in Watson's car, trying to hunt down Esmeralda to get her help, since she knows about the origins of all this. So Esmeralda, she advises them to use four-leaf clovers against Leprechaun, and Rory laces these hollow point bullets with clovers, and that and Jamie finds in the marijuana that Rory sold him earlier. And when the Leprechaun arrives, Rory shoots him with the clover bullets, only for his gun to jam on him before he can finish him off. And Rory and Emily have the chance to escape with the gold when the leprechaun is distracted by Jamie, and he's wounded by a baseball bat to the leg, and Esmeralda is end up killed in this kind of magical duel with the leprechaun, and then this follows up on to the roof of the building, where Rory tries fighting the leprechaun and is knocked out. Um, but before the leprechaun can kill Rory, Emily throws out some of his gold into this kind of wet concrete below to get his attention, and lures him into like the basement of the building, where she tosses all of his gold into this furnace before knocking the leprechaun inside. And now, believing that the leprechaun is dead, Emily returns back to Rory, only for the leprechaun to come back at them again and start attacking them again. So um they're knocking Emily off the roof and just kind of leaving her barely holding on. The leprechaun is like taunting her and everything, but is shot several times by Rory. And then he runs out of bullets, but distracts the leprechaun long enough for Emily to kind of hit him with the chest of coins, which sends him over the edge down below into this wet concrete, and where the leprechaun sinks and becomes trapped with his gold. And afterwards, Emily and Rory kind of renew their relationship. And then and Jamie also survives as well, and they kind of move on with their lives. And that's pretty much it. And it's kind of a sad um, ending, to how they ended the. They ended the franchise, well, at least the franchise, including Warwick Davis. For this being his last Leprechaun film, it was very lackluster. I'm not going to lie. I mean, like, there's parts of it I will rewatch this movie. There's parts of it I enjoy, but for that to be the eventual end of Warwick Davis as the Leprechaun it's kind of disappointing. I'm not going to lie. Um, so but this is one thing I did forget to mention. They actually give a name to the leprechaun in this one. Like, he's always just known as the leprechaun and all that, but in this one he's actually given a name. It's Lubden. So he's that's the name that he's referred to in this one. But I don't know. It's just it's weird. Like I said earlier at the beginning of this video, the timeline is weird. The continuity is weird in these movies. I fully believe that these movies are not all tied together. They are all they exist in their own um, solo timelines. So that's because that's the only way I can make sense of it. Like I said, because of just so many continuity errors throughout the franchise. So I just look at every one of these movies as their own, like, single timelines with each movie. Um, and then there's the character of Emily Woodrow, who is played by Tangi Miller or something like that, I think is her name. So she's one of the main characters here. She's this beautician who ends up discovering the leprechaun's gold, and she serves as kind of the moral compass of the group. Kind of just urging them to return the gold, and ultimately, kind of leading the charge against the leprechaun. And Rory Jackson, who's played by Laz Alonso, like I said, he plays MM on The Boys. He plays, Emily's ex-boyfriend, and he kind of has this kind of shady past, and deals drugs, and just kind of his initial reluctance to kind of give up the gold creates all this conflict for him. But he eventually, redeems himself by helping Emily defeat the leprechaun. And their friend Jamie, who's kind of just the comic relief in this. He's the very big stoner friend they got, and he kind of provides that moments of just of comedy here. And and also he unintentionally just helps the others kind of find the solution with these, like, four-leaf clovers. So uh, he did have a purpose in this movie, at least, other than just being a stoner. And as far as, like, memorable moments in this, like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of this film overall, but there are definitely moments that stand out to me, and they all involve the leprechaun. Just for one, the bong impalement. So that scene, it's kind of it's gruesome, but it's also darkly comedic. So in the leprechaun, he's in pursuit of that gold coin. And he uses the bong just as a weapon to to impale this guy, and he smokes from the bong too. So it's just a perfect blend of just absurd horror and comedy at the same time. Um, and also the Chanel having her jaw removed, like being pulled off by the leprechaun when he's trying to take her gold tooth back. Um, that's pretty, like, hilarious and gruesome at the same time. And that's just the way that is with all these kills in the Leprechaun franchise. And of course, the trademark rhyming. No Leprechaun movie with Warwick Davis is you can't it would not be the same. They wouldn't be the same if all of these didn't have at least some instant in the movie where Warwick Davis is doing this trademark rhyming in the Leprechaun series. And they're always very creative and just very darkly humorous. And I think the only, like I said, I've said this many times, but I think Warwick Davis is the only one is the only person that could pull that shit off. Um, but overall, Leprechaun Back to the Hood is generally considered probably the weakest entry in the franchise. There may be some other people that think that Leprechaun 4 is the weakest, but this is leaps and bounds. Well, let me rephrase that. Leprechaun 4 is leaps and bounds better than this movie. Um, and I mean, I will take Leprechaun 4 any day of the week over this. Um, and just, I think a lot of the attempts with this one to kind of blend horror with the urban themes, much like it was in Leprechaun in the Hood, um, a lot of the stuff in this one seems more forced. And I mean, while it does feel forced in Leprechaun in the Hood, it works and it's entertaining though. But I think that this one, the all the stuff in this was kind of forced and just didn't wasn't as successful, unfortunately. Um, but there are just like with any movie or any franchise, um, this one has garnered a cult following just as well amongst some people, and I just think it's a lot because of that whole aspect of it being over the top and just very absurd and um, but the low budget and the special effects in this, they're very cheesy as always, but I think it's it's a part of the charm for some people. Um, Not everybody, but for some people. And but I think that this as I said before, I think this the only the thing that disappoints me the most about this movie is this is how this was Warwick Davis's last Leprechaun movie, and but Warwick Davis, he is still acting. I would love for them to at least try to come out with one more Leprechaun movie. I mean, especially now where the I think the franchise is getting a more and more cult following now. These He's just get more attention with merchandise and the Trick or Treat Studios Leprechaun figure coming out. I know that Warwick Davis has said on many occasions that he would love to do another Leprechaun movie. Um, but I just guess nothing has came forward on that so far. I mean, I would still love to see it, while he is uh, currently acting. He just did that Willow TV series on Disney a couple of years ago. So apparently that I never got to watch that. Like it must have been so bad because Disney Plus already removed it from their streaming service. But I know that the way he's talked about that, he was really proud of it. And I know he wants to do another Leprechaun. So here's hoping that they may, because it really sucks knowing that this was his last one, and it was definitely the weakest in the series. So um, just in my opinion, we do need another Leprechaun movie with Warwick Davis. But yeah, guys, I mean that is the Leprechaun franchise starring Warwick Davis. I thought this was a given that I needed to do this, to kind of celebrate St. Patty's Day, and just I knew that I was eventually going to talk about these movies anyway because, like I said, this is one of my favorite, B movie, really cheesy, over the top horror comedy franchises of all time. Uh, and I needed a reason to talk about Warwick Davis. I mean, I know I'm eventually going to probably cover the Star Wars movies on here. I'm going to talk about Willow eventually. Which I do have plans right now to watch Willow here in the next few weeks, as I am going to be here in a few weeks. I'm going to be doing a sword and sorcery week, so Willow will be a part of that. Um, but coming up, I guess, so tomorrow I'm actually leaving for Cincinnati because this weekend is Horror Hound weekend. If you've not watched my Horror Hound weekend videos on the channel, definitely go check those out if you've never been to a horror convention. If you would like to go, I mean, I just kind of give you an insight about the convention things, little tips and tricks in those videos. Um, but yeah, I'm going this weekend. I'm definitely excited for that. It's me and my wife and my brother-in-law is going. Going to meet some of the celebrity guests, pick up some cool stuff at the convention. So I'll be talking all about that on Sunday on my video on Sunday, which I'll be reviewing just a couple of movies. I won't be doing as many as I normally do. I'll just be doing I'm going to be reviewing 2 movies on Sunday, which is going to be Thriller, A Cruel Picture, and also Hell Night. And I chose this. I was going to do The Blob. I was going to watch The Blob from 1988, the remake, because Kevin Dillon's going to be at Horror, or he was going to be at Horror Hound, but he canceled just last night. So I decided not to watch The Blob, and instead I watched Hell Night. So I'm going to be reviewing Hell Night because Linda Blair, who's in Hell Night, is going to be at Horror Hound, and then also, like I said, I watched Thriller, A Cruel Picture because Christina Lindbergh, who is my number one person I'm going to the convention for, is going to be there. And I'm so excited to meet her. I can't wait and just share with you guys my experience on this Sunday show about that. So, like I said, I'll be talking about the celebrities that I met. I'll be showing off some of the stuff that I bought at the show, and just telling you about my overall experience from the convention. And then I'll go over those 2 movies as well. And other than that, so next week is going to be a little bit different. So normally I do shows on Thursday and Sundays. Next week will be a little bit different of a schedule, as I'm going to be doing my own little festival of movies over 3 consecutive days, next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I'll be covering 5 movies for each of those days, and they will all consist of the same thing, and that's my favorite monster in the world, the king of the monsters, Godzilla. So that's right. I'm going to be doing a Godzilla Fest next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's going to be the first 15 Toho Godzilla films, the entire Showa era of Godzilla films. That I'm going to be covering over those 3 days next weekend. So if you're a Godzilla fan, I hope you guys can check out some of those videos. I'm going to be talk about those movies. That's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to be showing off a lot of my Godzilla collection within those videos as well each day. Just going to spread it out over all 3 days. And just I hope you guys can join me for those videos. And if you can't, when they're live, definitely check them out on the replay. If you're not here with me live tonight, and you're watching this on the replay, I just want to thank you guys for checking this video out. Thank you guys for checking all of my videos out so far, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed doing it and talking about the Leprechaun franchise with Warwick Davis. And just want to thank everybody that's been in the chat tonight. Greg and Daniel, appreciate you guys talking with me throughout the evening. Really appreciate you guys always being here. And just drop me a comment below. Once this is over with, if you're watching this on the replay, drop me a comment below on what your favorite Leprechaun movie is. What is your favorite moment in the Leprechaun movies? Your favorite kill in the Leprechaun movies? Is your favorite kill the one where he explodes out of the dude's dick? I mean, it's one of mine. It's definitely memorable. I talk about it enough. But also, as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, guys. I'd really appreciate that. And if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button to catch more videos from me like this one. And also, you want to click that bell for any kind of future notifications when I have a new video that's coming up, or I'm doing a live stream, and that's usually what I do, guys. I usually do live streams, so you'll get notifications for that as well. but it's a rare occasion for me to do a pre-recorded video because I like to be real with you guys. I like to be genuine. I like to just kind of live in the moment with these live streams. So, if I mess up, I mess up, whatever, that's life. It's cause when I don't know what it is. I mean, no offense to anybody that does pre-recorded videos, but just like, um, I'm not a scripted type of guy. I do make notes for myself and stuff to kind of, remind myself of what I need to talk about and keep a constant flow of conversation. But I'm a kind of a spur of the moment, like live and in color, I guess, type of guy. But again, before I go, thank you guys for checking out the video. Thank you guys for being here in the chat with me. I appreciate all you guys. So, with all that said, I'm Crater. This is CraterMania. I love you guys and have a good night.
Me, it look like a leprechaun to me. All I gotta do is look up in the tree. Who else seen the leprechaun say yeah? Yeah!